Tonight on Central Coast News, the big story. The Naval Postgraduate School under fire. In the last 24 hours, 2 top officials out of a job. Now NPS goes on the record. Tonight, the Center for Investigative Action team takes a look at who these 2 men are and how deep the alleged misconduct goes.
Some of the stuff just seems shady, and that's kind of one of the reasons I left.
The impact of the prestigious school and the community surrounding it. Plus, what's the next step in the investigation? And what does the following really mean? The right way, the wrong way, the Navy way. A special edition of Central Coast News at 6 starts right now.
In high definition, this is Central Coast News right now.
Good evening, I'm John K. Brent. We devote the next 12 minutes to this issue. Let's get started with who's at the center of the investigation. It's former President Daniel Oliver and former Vice President and Provost Leonard Ferrari. 2 reports have been released detailing the alleged mismanagement by the 2. Today, Jasmine Veal and Mark Cotter-Robles spent time learning who these 2 men are and their roles at the school. First, Mark Cotter-Robles kicks off this 360 coverage on the former president.
It was April 1st, 2007, when Vice Admiral Daniel T. Oliver was appointed by the Secretary of the Navy to be president of the Naval Postgraduate School. But let's rewind 40 years. His career began in 1966 when he went through the Naval Reserve Officer Training Corps program at the University of Virginia. He later became a naval aviator specializing in detecting and tracking submarines, completing 8 operational deployments around the world during the Cold War with the Soviet Union. In September 1996, Oliver became the Chief of Naval Personnel, serving as an advocate for sailors, both officer and enlisted, from recruitment through retirement. His own retirement from active duty came in February 2000 when he became active in the private sector as a senior executive and board member for several companies and civic organizations. Well, it's also worth mentioning back in 1982, Daniel Oliver was named a White House Fellow in honor of his leadership in the military. All right, Jazz, you did some digging on the former provost, Dr. Leonard Ferrari. What'd you find?
All right, so the former executive vice president and provost, Dr. Leonard Ferrari, has quite the impressive resume. Dr. Leonard Ferrari was appointed executive vice president and provost of the Naval Postgraduate School in July 2006. During those years, Ferrari was credited with proposing new collaborative efforts with regional research and education institutions and streamlining the academic and business processes on campus. Prior to becoming the provost, he was the dean of research at NPS. He oversaw grants, contracts, and developed relations with the UC system. A very bright man, he's published approximately 100 research articles in electrical engineering, and at one time was a faculty member at the University of California, Irvine, where he also earned his PhD. Just over the summer, Ferrari traveled to the National University of Singapore to deliver the keynote address to graduating students of their Defense Systems Institute, which has a partnership with NPS. All right, so John, further proof here that his work is very advanced, and it's hard to even understand what he worked on unless you're an engineer or a mathematician. His most recent research is in the area of spline computations, or evaluating curves and complex models that have to do for computer graphics and data compression.
All right, thank you very much, Jazz. And just 90 minutes ago, the Naval Postgraduate School went on the record with a news conference. Central Coast News reporter Marissa Pendergrass was there and joins us live in Monterey. And Marissa, what did they have to say?
John, I'm in Monterey, where just a little while ago on the Naval Postgraduate campus, Navy officials explained how all that evidence of mismanagement and failure to comply with federal statutes and Navy regulations came to light. U.S. Navy Undersecretary Robert Work and NPS Interim President Rear Admiral Jan Tighe explained why former President Daniel Oliver resigned yesterday and former Provost Dr. Leonard Ferrari was fired and put on administrative leave following an in-depth investigation by the Naval Inspector General. Work says there wasn't a whistleblower in either case. He says the investigation started last October after an allegation of senior leader misconduct through an internal investigation. Work says that charge was passed along to the Inspector General, launching an investigation into both men. He says there aren't any criminal charges against Oliver or Ferrari, and he doesn't expect there to be any. Work says it took more than a year to get those reports out on waste and mismanagement because the findings were so egregious.
want to make sure that we don't make a mistake. The IG report was requested by me because of some activities that I wanted to say, look, I don't know if this is the right thing. I'd like to know whether or not we're following the rules.
Work says both the resignation and the firing closes the book on this investigation. Now Rear Admiral Jan Tighe will take over and serve as the interim president. She is a former NPS student and says she plans to take this investigation as a learning experience, hoping to make NPS a better institution. In Monterey, Marissa Pendergrass, your Central Coast News.
All right, very good. Thanks for that reporting out there, Marissa. The investigation reveals allegation after allegation that question the morals and the ethics of the naval administrators. Now, the IG report showed the list of gifts received from the Naval Postgraduate School Foundation. Foundation records show it used account funds to pay for receptions, faculty, candidate meals, workshops, refreshments, wine, working meals, hosting foreign delegations, course speaker dinners, dinners with research sponsors. Now, Central Coast News reporter Ricardo Navarro joins us now to explain how a familiar military phrase could explain more of the investigation.
It was a famous movie, The Caine Mutiny, in 1954 that coined the phrase, "There's the right way, the wrong way, and the Navy way." Lieutenant Keeg, played by actor Humphrey Bogart, said this line after he was unsatisfied with the shipmate's performance in the movie. But what exactly has the Navy way come to mean? One Navy service member I spoke to said what this basically means is the military has their own way of doing things, which may not be considered the right way in the, quote, civilian world. That could partially explain what this 130-page investigation revealed. The Naval Inspector General investigation said what Oliver did was, quote, rule-breaking, crossing the Navy Code of Ethics. Several expert bloggers I've found pretty much say the same thing. The Navy way is the winning way, a way that is different than maybe you and I deem as right or wrong. But the service member I talked to would argue the Navy holds itself to a higher standard. I'm Ricardo Navarro in Monterey, your Central Coast News.
And because the allegations against the president and provost, it's put the school under a microscope. Tonight, the school's foundation is speaking out. The foundation released this statement in part that says, quote, the Naval Postgraduate School Foundation is in the process of reviewing the Naval Inspector General report of NPS released yesterday, end quote. Goes on to say, quote, the NPS Foundation solicits, receives, and administers funds, securities, and gifts in kind in order to provide NPS with a wide range of support for its academic programs and faculties, end quote. From technology to businesses, now that the school is under a microscope, we wanted to know what changes the school could face and what impact will that have on the community surrounding it. Our Instant Special moves forward tonight with Jacqueline Tuala, who hits the streets and found out how the shakeup could rattle our economy.
The Naval Postgraduate School is one of the two premier institutions on the West Coast representing the highest of military intelligence. So when two of its top leaders were ousted after accusations of defying Navy rules, you'd think the local community would be talking about it. But some people I talked to today not only didn't know what happened, and when I told them, they didn't care.
I live right across the street from them, and I happen to know that they're there, but it's not part of the dialogue. Not part of the neighborhood dialogue.
A lot of it, people admitted, was because NPS prides itself in secrecy as far as the public's concerned.
I don't think it's going to make any difference. I think for the average population, they don't even think about who's there.
But Marianne Leffel, president of the Monterey County Business Council and chair of the Monterey Regional Airport, says what people don't know and should care about is NPS impacts the community in significant ways: technology, research, and business.
We know that we have a large amount of our passengers daily who are associated with the Navy Postgraduate School, either through contracting, through visits, or through students.
She says the council is working on the first economic report on NPS. For now, we know that for each dollar spent in the community, there's a multiplier of at least 2.3. Jacqueline Tuala, your Central Coast News.
And the Naval Postgraduate School has also been active in providing expertise to the Monterey County Gang Task Force. NPS is a research university and is operated by the United States Navy. At any given time, there are up to 1,600 students. Last year, there were 737 faculty members and 596 staff members. All right, our 360 coverage now continues in depth While we look at the Naval Postgraduate School, and joining us now is Brooke Holmquist, who is at the NPS when Defense Secretary and Monterey native Leon Panetta spoke to the school. Brooke?
Yeah, John, it's interesting because Panetta addressed a large auditorium of NPS students at the time, talking about the cutting-edge military technology and defense that actually happens there at the school. He talked then about the threat of defense budget cuts and warned of another $5 to $6 billion cut. Now, it's interesting because maybe that was a little foreshadowing of what we're up against with this fiscal cliff. But that day, he pledged to work to protect the legacy of our local military schools, including the Naval Postgraduate. He called them national treasures, in fact.
We're going to be able to advance stability in some of the countries that we're fighting in today. We've got to be able to understand what motivates those countries, what motivates their people, understand where they're coming from, their culture, their beliefs, their faiths, their ideologies.
Of course, at that time, Panetta was speaking when the Libyan people had just overthrown Gaddafi. He said then that was an example of a time that schools like the Defense Language Institute and the Naval Postgraduate are really crucial in these kind of situations with our national defense in the places that we are visiting. It's interesting because he told me then that now that he was in that position, that he's in that position as the Defense Secretary, that these schools will have a friend in Washington. So it'll be interesting to see now that this has come out, John, if that holds true.
An interesting note that the Undersecretary of the Navy today said this wasn't about academics at the school.
Exactly.
It was more about the administration.
Exactly, and it'll be interesting to see definitely that fallout, how separate it is from what the good work really that they're doing there.
All right,
so.
Brooke Holmquist tonight. Thank you for that report. Appreciate that. All right, so as for what's next for the school, the Undersecretary of the Navy hopes that the school will have a to-do list on improvements that can be made within about 2 months. And that concludes our instant special, but the news never stops online. Find out the latest information on the firing of the NPS's 2 administrators, as well as the full statement from the foundation and input from the community. Just head over to KIONrightnow.com. And once again, we don't want to forget our volunteers at Project Santa over there till 6:30 tonight. You can call them and help a foster child this season, 831-784-6321. They'll be there till 6:30. Give them a call. We'll be right back.
Central Coast News has created TV news that can now travel with you by launching one of the nation's first 24/7 mobile local news channels. Central Coast News 24/7 allows you to see local news anytime from your smartphone or tablet. Start watching right now by downloading the free SyncBack app for your iPhone or Droid. Want more information? Visit KIONrightnow.com. More news coming your way in just 2 minutes.